Hey there, welcome to Board Game Hot Takes, the podcast where we give our immediate reactions to the hottest board games just minutes after playing them. My name's Tim.
And I'm Chris.
This is Adam.
And we're going to give our hot takes on the game that we just finished playing, Eclipse, Second Dawn for the Galaxy. As always, I'm going to give a brief description of the game and then we'll jump in with our thoughts. In Eclipse, Second Dawn for the Galaxy, you control an intergalactic species that is trying to gain dominance in the galaxy. On your turn, you'll take one of several actions available to you by moving influence tokens off of your influence track to the action sections on your board, which will uncover additional money costs that you have to pay at the end of the round. So the more actions you take in a round, the more money you'll have to have gained in income. The actions you'll take include exploring, where you'll reveal a new space tile in the play area, hoping to discover special alien technologies or resource-rich planets. Researching, where you'll spend science resources to draft technology tiles that can be used to upgrade the ships in your fleet or provide other ongoing benefits. Upgrading, where you'll place your research technology tiles into one of your 4 ship blueprints, which permanently improves the attack power, defense, or movement of all ships of that type in your fleet. Building, where you'll spend materials to construct additional ships in a region of the play area where you have an influence token. And moving, where you'll move ships to adjacent regions. If 2 or more players have ships in a region at the end of the round, combat ensues using dice based on the types and quantity of symbols each player has in their ship's blueprints. Victory points are gained by winning combats, researching technology, and controlling a region at the end of the game. And the player with the most victory points at the end of 8 rounds wins the game. Eclipse Second Dawn for the Galaxy was designed by Tuku Tukulako and published by Lataplay Fee. Let's jump into our thoughts. So let's start with the mechanisms, as always. And Adam, I'd love to hear what some of the interesting mechanisms that you find in Eclipse Second Dawn for the Galaxy.
Oh gosh, the mechanisms for Eclipse, for me, they flow. They work so well together. Just a broad picture, they just all kind of blend together so easily in a way that makes so much sense. The mechanisms just all work together. I'll start with, for your actions, you have little discs on the right side that all cover up a certain amount of money, and you slide those discs over to the left side for your action. The discs on the right side are in increasing, at least I guess the circles on the right side are increasing amounts of money. So the more discs you slide from the right side to the left side, the more money you have to pay. So you're paying for the more actions you take. So that is just cool to me right there. So you can compute ahead like how much money you're going to have, how many actions you can take. If it's usually it's around 2 or 3 or 4. If you do it right, you get a few more actions than the rest of the players, or you can plan ahead. You're going to have 2 actions. You're going to take that first player. That's another mechanism. You pass first, you get a couple extra bucks, and it helps you get a little advantage for the next round. So that's the one action that kind of stands out right away that I want to call out is your economy is tied into how many actions you can take. There's something about it that is just so sweet and so nice to me. So that's the first one I want to talk about. I have more, but I'll give you guys a chance to talk about that.
Yeah, let's a little bit about that too. I think it's interesting. I think it's really clever too, but I think it's also interesting that some of the actions that you actually take those influence discs and you put them out on the board, for example. So when you do an explore, if you explore an area and you want to inhabit it, which means that you can get take advantage of some of the income planets out there and get points for it at the end of the game, you also take those influence tokens off your influence track and put them on the board. So now it's giving you a benefit, but it's also deducting how many actions you can take in future rounds, or it's going to cost you more this round and impact your actions next round. So it's really a push and pull with those influence discs as far as, how are you going to use them so that you get the most benefit out of the game with it. And it's definitely a fun decision point. Some turns you can have 5, 6, 7 actions that you can get done. And then some turns, if you haven't kind of picked up enough money income and you've put too many discs out on the board or whatever, you can end up in a situation where you're like, I guess I'm going to get 1 or 2 actions this turn and then I've got to pass. So it's definitely a fun push and pull there. What about you, Chris? Any other thoughts you want to add on about that particular mechanism?
About that particular mechanism, I think the one thing I would say, and let me first comment on sort of the overall package of the game, because I think like Adam just said, there's a lot to like here. And I'm not one of the folks who loves games where you just throw a lot of mechanisms into one game kind of for the sake of adding more mechanisms. this game, it's a really balanced package. There's a lot happening, but at the same time, I think it plays really smoothly and very intuitively. The one thing, going back to your question, that I find a little bit unsatisfying, it's probably my one complaint about the game, is that all these things you're trying to do with your influence tokens, it ends up feeling a little bit stingy to me, because you sometimes do have to limit yourself so much on what you're doing with those tokens, but you have so many options of what you can do. And I understand. I mean, that's a part of the strategy too. It's picking your actions wisely. But with this much going on, it would feel better to me if you were able to do a little bit more with the turn than you sometimes can.
Yeah, it's a tight economy for sure, and that can feel painful sometimes. That said, I think it's a good thing that the economy is a little tight, and it's good that it limits your actions, because the game goes long enough as it is, and it feels like a full, complete game. Feels like you get a lot out of it. Think about all the stuff you can do in the game, what that would do if you weren't as limited by the actions you could take. So I don't know. I mean, yeah, it's an interesting idea. The one thing you said, Chris, that stood out to me was that you said that was the one thing that you didn't like about the game, and I'm shocked that there isn't more things that you don't like about the game. So why don't I segue into one of the things that I don't really like about the game? The game is, there's several things I'm sure you guys are going to jump into. One of them being the fact that you get to upgrade your ships, right? And it's really cool. I'm going to let one of you guys jump into that a little bit more, and I'll add on to it. But bottom line is you can research technology and then upgrade your ships, and it's a really neat, fascinating way to kind of feel like you're really building something and kind of making it your own game. One of the things I don't like about that, though, is that for the most part, what ends up happening is you build up your ships over the whole course of the game, and it almost always just results in battles right at the end. It doesn't feel like that. What is really a core mechanism and a core fun part of the game just isn't as it's just not as usable throughout the game as I think that I would have preferred. I find myself kind of staying away from doing the upgrading, maybe for a couple of reasons that I'll get into, but from doing the upgrading and trying to stay away from combat as much as possible as I can in the game, because I just feel like, man, I just have to invest so much and then hope that with all that investment that my dice rolls go my way, and so I think it's a little unfortunate that for how cool that whole blueprint mechanism is, that you don't get to actually do much with what you've built up. So that's one of my complaints about it. I guess it's probably a good time to kind of segue into the actual blueprint building itself. Adam, would you like to talk a little bit about that? Because I know that's a part of the game that you really like.
Yeah, the shipbuilding is great. You basically have 3 ships that each civilization, each faction comes with. You have your interceptors that have 4 slots on them, typically. The next one up is your cruisers. I think you have something like 6 slots, and your dreadnoughts, you have like something like 8 slots. So you really have to be wise with how you build those ships, because each part, like each weapon, for instance, costs a certain amount of energy. So in one of the spots on the ship is energy production. One of the spots on the ship that has to be there is how many movement, a drive, an engine. So that has to be there. If you want your ship to be any good, it has to have a weapon to fire on other ships. So like your interceptors, for instance, they have those 4 slots. You really have to be careful with what you're putting in there so those ships are worthwhile. Same with the cruisers. You want to maximize how worthwhile they are. Now, having said that, a lot of times, like you touched on, Tim, those ships are more for deterrence than anything else. And that goes into, maybe getting a little bit ahead of myself, but that goes into the combat. You really want to be careful when you go into combat. You don't want to lose combat in that game. That can really hurt you badly. So it all kind of ties together with how you're going to use your resources to research your ship parts, to upgrade your ships, to make sure that they can fight in battles that are worth fighting, or to deter people from coming in and just wiping you out.
Yeah. I was just going to say, I mean, you mentioned it's losing battles is very bad. And I think that's what kind of pushes a lot of the battle to the end of the game, because until you feel like you've built up your ships well enough to protect yourself, and make sure that you can win a combat, it takes a lot of investment in doing that. You might have had to research 3 or 4 technology tiles, and you'll have to use a couple build actions to get those built up. That whole puzzle is great though, right? Like the blueprints, how there's a limited number of slots, and there's a couple open ones, and then a couple that already exist that are maybe weaker. So you can either fill in the open slots, or you can kind of cover over existing things like existing shields or weapons or whatever. But then some of them also take extra energy. And so there's a certain amount of energy your ship has. And in order to do the most powerful weapons, maybe you have to add extra energy to your ship first. And so it's a really fun, kind of cool puzzle that you get to do there. But as you mentioned, because if you go in and just start, trying combats early when you don't feel like you have the protection or you don't have powerful enough weapons or missiles that can take out your opponents first, you're really putting yourself at a risk that you just walked into a combat and then they roll some good dice and you've just lost not only that action, but also all the actions that it took to build up your ships. And so I think that's what kind of pushes the combat to the end of the game for the most part. And that's kind of a shame, but you're right. They are often used as deterrents. I mean, like this game, I did quite a bit of technology investment, mainly for the purpose of getting points, but a lot of the technology I invested in was weapons and shields. And it turned out I never had to actually upgrade my ships at all. I didn't do a single upgrade action this game, but they were sitting there with the intent of deterring, right? So that if any of you guys looked like you were going to come in close to my territories, I'd start upgrading the heck out of the ships so that I had something to protect myself and hopefully stop you from coming into my territories. So yeah, combat's definitely risky.
Yeah, that point about the blueprints is one of the things that I wanted to bring out about this game too, and it's one of my favorite parts of it. And that thing you were saying, Tim, about the combat sort of being pushed toward the end of the game, that doesn't actually bother me because that feels very thematic to me. It's kind of like the epic battle scenes happen at the end of the game, and they're very consequential. So you really want to make sure that you're situated well for it. You want to be prepared for battle, and I think that, in a way, that makes it really exciting. And, in this game, for one of the things that I noticed was that, you had put all this prep into, getting your ships ready, but you didn't actually invest a lot in building ships and building those out. And none of us really caught on maybe with what you were doing to get your points, because I'll note here that you did win the game tonight. And none of us realized that we should have been going in there and being more aggressive toward you, because then that may have been a smart move for us. But then that goes back to the different ways that you can proceed to victory. So I don't mind that piece of it. But let me also touch on real quick the mechanism of battle, because that's sort of the other side of the dice there, or the other side of the coin, and is the actual battle mechanism. And one of the things
Chris, I think it's literally the other side of the dice.
It's literally, literally. The coin, dice, let's mix our metaphors a little bit. Actually, speaking of dice, one of the things I love about this is that there are different dice for different weapons. And that is so much fun because they do function differently. And to the point where one that I invested in heavily this time, which I just think is a fun mechanism, is something called a rift cannon, where you can actually, you do a lot of damage to your opponents, but you can also do damage to yourself. So I won some battles, but in the midst of doing that, actually took some of my own ships out. And then there's the other pieces of the blueprint as well. You have shields that can protect you. You can have computers that increase your aim, your ability to hit your opponents. And there's just so many little pieces there that the battles are intricate and interesting, I think.
Agreed, Chris. This game to me is just cool. The shipbuilding mechanism is just cool. Like you said, you have these computers that increase your precision of your weapons. You have shields that can decrease the effectiveness of opponents' weapons. Going back to the Tim winning the game, other than combat, there's a few different ways to win this game. Tim went with this little monolith strategy, and I think he built 3. He had 9 extra points from these monoliths, which totally won him the game. Having said that, my final combat of the game, I went in, I tried to fight so the game supplies some enemies too. You can go in and fight them. Had I won this combat, I was guaranteed 2 additional points from a tile that was underneath this guardian, is what they're called. We're rolling the dice. Boom. I didn't come out with the win. That from that battle, I only got 1 point, whereas I could have got 3 points. I lost to Tim by 2 points. So this game, that was a final round. This game kind of, for me, it crescendos at the right time. It does have that element of randomness, which makes it fun to me. I could see that being an off-putting for some people. But I like that dice roll element, that randomness element. The odds, you go in there, you have a decent idea of how you're going to do. But there is that element of the unknown, which I think is fantastic.
Agreed.
Yeah, the game, the randomness in the game adds a lot of fun. When you go out exploring and you flip over one of the tiles, it's exciting to see what you're going to get. But the randomness can also be really frustrating, both with the exploration as well as with the combat. You guys, you experienced a little bit. Steve experienced a little bit tonight where you lost combats because of some bad rolls, or got yourself set back quite a bit. The exploration, right, Steve? His first two explorations, and exploration is important in the early phases of this game because that's how you build up more, resource income and money income and stuff like that. And two of his first three explorations, which was most of his first round, ended up being tiles that had ancients on them that he really couldn't do anything with at all. So he, while the rest of us were kind of building up income and getting benefits, he wasn't getting any immediate benefits, maybe some future opportunities that were there. And that can be frustrating in the game, but it also is very exciting, both in the combat, which like Chris said, feels cinematic and, exciting when it's happening, but also in the exploration.
Agreed. So the two kind of main elements of randomness are you have the dice rolls and then you have the exploration. So, but as you play this game more and more, I think all of us have played this game 4, 5, 6 times, something like that. You get a sense of what exploration tiles are good and helpful and what, which ones you can throw away. So there is that slight mitigation element where, for the exploration at least, you can throw away a tile, which is nice. And as I've played more and more, I realize what tiles are beneficial and which tiles are garbage and which ones to get rid of early. So for me, I like that element. I like everybody is going to have that randomness coming out, and you're going to have to decide to keep it, or you get to decide to keep it or to throw it away. You do kind of waste a turn, but it might end up being beneficial. And early on in this game, I threw away a tile, which I think ended up helping me out.
Yeah, the going back to the combat for a second, when we were recording our episode on Cthulhu Wars a little while back, one of the things I mentioned there was how I like the simplicity of the dice combat. Basically it's like two players pick up the number of dice they can roll and they throw them on the board. This is exactly the opposite of that, because in this game, you get specific dice based on the ships you have in the battle, but maybe all your ships don't roll dice at the same time because you might have more, quicker initiative than the opponent with one ship, but not with other ships. So you've got basically the situation where one person's rolling a couple dice for one ship, then the opponent rolls some dice, then you roll some dice, then the opponent rolls some dice. And in all those rolls, it's possible nobody hit anything. So then you do that all over again. And you could do that 4, 5, or 6 times before the combat gets resolved and everything's wiped off. And on each of those rolls, you got to check to see, okay, I rolled a 4, a 5, and a hit, a 6. Except, wait, I've got -2 on my shields. Oh, but I've got +2 on my on my attack, and then I've got a hole, so that cancels this thing out, and this cancels this thing out. And it's quite there's a lot of it's thematic, right? It adds all the parts that you can build up on your ship and protect yourself, and add attacks that someone else can't protect against it. But it does take quite a bit of thinking, and it takes time. And so when a combat happens at the end of the round, everyone else is kind of sitting there for several minutes. Now it's exciting, right? It's an exciting several minutes because the combat is thematic and it can be game determining. I wanted to call that out though, because I think that was one of the more overly complex pieces of the game when I got into it, understanding how the rules work with combat and how the upgrades apply to those dice rolls and things like that. But also just that the combat itself is not that straightforward. Roll a couple dice and then we've got our winners to determine, right? It can take a while. That can be a big part of any round, is if there's a couple combats going on, we could be waiting there for 10 minutes and I might not be involved. I want to roll the dice for the ancients on the board because at least it gives me something to do while you guys are doing combats, So that's one other thing about the dice rolling, which again, it's cinematic, it's thematic, but it's a little bit, it's a little slow, to get through that process.
I always love that downtime during combat because it lets me plan out my moves. It always takes me 15, 20 minutes to come up with a move. So it gives me a chance to do that without you guys harassing me.
I enjoy that part of the battle. I like the combat, makes sense to me. Not at first, like you said, it's not very, you have to read into it and study it a little bit. But once you understand it, it makes a lot of sense. You want to get your computers that give you more attack. You want to get maybe your shields that prevent other people's attack. You want to build up your hull so you can survive more hits. I like all of that. I like a game that has, a relatively in-depth combat segment, not just something like roll these 5 dice and then, 4 of them are hits, combat over. I like it that there's that next level of combat. That's kind of a turn on for me. I could see how that could be a turn off for a lot of people.
What do you guys think about the asymmetry of the factions here? I think there's 6 different factions, right? Because you can play up to 6 players. But do you feel like they're different enough to be interesting? Do you feel like are there any that particularly stand out to you? How does that feel to you compared to other games?
That's when you read my mind, because that was the next thing I was going to bring up. And you had made the comparison before to Cthulhu Wars, and I think this is another area where there is some comparison to be made. And I won't say better or worse; it's different, and it's a different kind of action there. In Cthulhu Wars, it's extreme asymmetry. You really have to understand your faction, or you're going to falter. And if you understand the other factions really well, like if you've played the game a lot of times, then you can really dig into it and maximize your game. In Eclipse, you have the asymmetry, but it's not that extreme. For example, one faction starts off with a bunch of money. Another one might have the ability to do more research than the other. So it's enough to make it interesting, but it's not so different faction to faction that you can't really function if you've never played your faction before.
Agreed, Chris. It has that sort of terraforming Mars-ish where the factions are all a little bit different, but not too much different. It's not like Root or not like Cthulhu Wars, agreed, where you have to totally study your faction for a solid 5-10 minutes to get the hang of it and know what to do. You can get going and understand kind of not maybe the in-depth nuances, but the general gist of your faction, and it gives you a direction you can start heading in, at least.
Yeah, I agree. And I think you're right on. Like this feels more like a game, maybe like Scythe, where, the factions have some unique abilities, but they're not so different that you have to learn a different game. And there's not so much you have to track that's unique. You can just play the game, but every once in a while you have to be like, okay, I remember now I've got this extra ability, this extra thing I can do. But it does it really smoothly. It handles the faction differences really smoothly.
I do want to mention each faction has the option to flip your player board upside down, and it has the human race, the Terran faction, on the other side, which, you could have 5 people all be the humans and would be totally symmetric starting out, which is another kind of gist. I don't think any one of us has ever been the humans in any game we've played, which from what I understand, the humans are not a bad race to be. They have the best trade power. That's their asymmetric power, if you will.
Yeah, and the fun thing is like, before when we were getting together for a game night tonight, we were texting each other like, oh, I hope I get, because we randomly pick factions, right? We don't like go in there and be like, I want to do this one, I'll take it first. Because I think we all enjoy the fun of the exploration and having to work with what you're given. So we randomly assign factions. But before the game started tonight, we were texting each other, and Adam's like, oh, I really hope I get the tree people. And I was like, yeah, I really want the technology people, because they're actually all fun. Like I've played probably 4 of the 6 at this point, and I've had a good time trying to figure out how to work with them. So they add a little bit of change and some fun direction that they're fun to explore.
Yeah, for sure.
Let's jump into the production of Eclipse, Second Dawn for the Galaxy. So Adam and I have played this in person. Adam's got the big old all-in Kickstarter package with the neoprene mat and the pre-painted minis and everything. Chris, you've only played it online, I think, at this point, right? So you haven't seen the physical production of it.
Yeah, that's right.
I'll just jump in and say that minis in this game are the best miniatures that I've ever seen. The pre-painted, these were pre-painted, so they're like unique colors, but then they also have kind of a, what do you call that little coating on it?
They have like a wash.
They have a wash on it. And these ships, they're all unique. Each faction has unique ships. So they all have like 4 different types of ships, and they're all unique sculpts for each of the ships. And then the ships that the AI ships that the game brings in, there's 2 different models plus the big, huge base in the middle. And every one of the minis just is so cool. They work great with the game. The wash on those minis just looks fantastic. So I'll just start there. There's a lot to say about the production, but Adam, anything else on the physical production that you think is stands out?
I don't have much experience with board games. In recent board games I've been playing for about 3 years. I've done some Kickstarters. I played plenty of games. In my experience with board games, this is the best produced board game I've seen. I got the Kickstarter edition, so it does have the wash on the minis. It has the game trays that come with little storage units for each faction. There's human ships that have the wash on them too, in all the different colors. The neoprene mat is amazing. Each sector tile has like a little UV like reflective coating for the different planets, different resources. You got the orbitals and the monoliths that come in there with the game, little structures that you put your cubes slot into there nicely. It is absolutely amazing.
It's so beautiful, in fact, that if you go take a look at boardgamehottakes.com, you'll notice I use it for one of our homepage pictures, like a picture of my first play of it, because it's just the prettiest, like, just display of components and art and everything out on the board. Now, the once you build out the board is it's very modular. Like, there's always a base tile in the middle, and then each faction starts with one tile around the board. And then other than that, it's as you explore, you just place more tiles on the board. So it doesn't have the kind of like game board that is just, nice art and filled out and everything. Like, it doesn't start that way. But as you kind of explore the galaxy and build out, it just gets full of colorful little galaxies and miniatures all over the place and everything. It's quite a presence on the table once it's out there. Chris, what about you? Anything on the production that stands out?
Yeah, I just wish that I could play the hard copy version of it. I mean, I have seen the pictures and I was absolutely blown away by it. I'm jealous of Adam for actually having it. I love a game that has the quality components, especially one where you can like pick up these big ships in your hand, and that makes such a difference. I don't have much to say about that because I haven't actually played it, other than to say it's a thing of beauty just from the pictures that I've seen. We played the tabletop simulator mod, and I will say that, I mean, it's a very nice looking mod, but the one thing that's a little bit disappointing about it, or a lot disappointing, is that they didn't make any effort to differentiate the different fleets, the different factions fleets, the way that they do in the hard copy version, which is kind of a shame, because you have unlimited resources, so to speak, on the internet. And in designing those. And so the fact that they, gave you these really, really neutral, kind of standardized looking spaceships is really kind of a disappointment. But yeah, it doesn't detract much from the game, maybe a little bit, but not a lot.
Chris, you get what you pay for.
Yeah, right.
One of the other things about the physical production, which is great, and which I think is not only, I think it's important not only because it looks great and it just adds more presence and makes it more fun to play with, but it makes it functional to set up, and that is the game trays that come with the game. So there is game trays for each faction, so it's really easy. All the ships are kind of stored in there, and their player card and their resource tokens and everything. But then also there's a game tray for all the technology tiles that you can buy throughout the course of the game. If I remember right, Adam, you can probably add on to this, but I just remember it being really nice, because if you're sitting at a big table with 5 or 6 people, and you need to be able to look at what's available to draft from that market, from the technology market, you can just pass that whole tray around and everyone can just take a look at it and then set it back down. So that's a really nice add-on. I could imagine that being really frustrating to set up and to kind of try to work with if you didn't have that game tray system.
Agreed. Yeah, you got the tactile tray, which you can just pass around from player to player, and you also have the ship blueprint tray. Somebody's like, hey, I need a couple of these blueprints. Can you hand that? So you hand that tray over, they grab their blueprints, and you can just set it aside when you're done with it, which kind of lending me on the path of going back to mechanisms, where we have these, we didn't talk about the tech tracks going up, and then the 3 different types of resources. Yeah. The tech tracks are nice. It's another way to score points. And then the resources, you got 3 different types of resources, which you're using throughout the game too.
Yeah, I think I did actually thought the same thing as I just mentioned that tray. I think it's worth talking about the tech tracks. There's a lot of things about the technology that's pretty neat, but one of them that I like is that every round you just draft a certain number of technology tiles, or a certain number come out of a bag based on the number of players. So we played a 4-player game tonight, so I think it was 7 technology tiles. And so what that means is that in the beginning of the game, there's a limited number of different technologies that you have available to purchase. And there's a little bit of a fight for them. If there's a really cool technology that comes up, the first person that wants to invest in technology is going to grab the best technology, and it's not available. But then the next round, another 7 is going to come out, and it might be some duplicates, but it's going to add. There's more variety, but it definitely changes the first half of the game. It feels different every game because you just have different options available. And even this game, like, there was a technology that I was really looking forward to building, and it didn't come up. I think one came up, Adam bought it, and I never saw another one the rest of the game. I was looking for one of I think it was the advanced building materials or whatever, because I had several spaces I could have taken advantage of it, and I just never saw it. So it's kind of neat. It changes the way the game flows and what's available to you and what you can do in the game. So yeah, I'm glad you touched on that, because I think that's something we skipped over in mechanisms that is pretty important. All right, cool. Anything else, Adam, from a production perspective that you stands out?
Yeah, the iconography is simple. Once just like any game, there's a little bit of learning curve, but here again, it's relatively easy to figure out. The game does come with
player aids.
Perfect. That's what I'm trying to figure out. Little trifold player aids that has pretty much everything you need. If if you're not familiar with a certain tech tile or a certain discovery tile, it explains it right there. And there's like 4 of those come with this version, and you can just distribute those out, pass them around if you got more than 4 players. And it's another just nice little touch that they threw in here.
Yeah, that's a great point. It makes it really easy. It's pretty easy once you know the rules of the game to understand what most of the iconography does. But if there's a technology tile you don't understand, it's right on a player aid and it spells it out for you. So we really never have to, for that perspective, we never have to go and reference the rule book. We can usually just glance at a player aid if we need something. We've had to reference the rule book for some other things. There's some little edge case rules and some things that don't come up a whole lot that you do have to go back and check the rule book on. But that's a good point.
I was going to say, it is amazing for a game as complex as this one is, just how intuitive it is.
Yeah, and I like one of the other user experience pieces is again, this is the Kickstarter version. I don't know how the base game is different or how the original, the first edition of Eclipse was. The way you track resources here is pretty neat. On the top of one of the game trays, there are just 3 little tracks. And the tracks just have different numbers on them. As you remove a cube off one of those tracks, it exposes the number of income that you're producing from that type, and you put the income marker out on the board. It's just a really neat little interface, and it's pretty intuitive. So yeah, all those things work really well. Adam, have you ever seen the first edition of Eclipse, or have you ever played it? Do you know how that compares?
No. So 20 years ago, I was at a game store with my father, and I didn't take I saw the box there and it looked cool, space game. But the $90 at the time for a board game was, we weren't ready to take that kind of plunge. So short answer is no, I haven't taken a look. It's not too much different, but the second edition does have some nice upgrades, production upgrades, and game tray stuff and this and that help everything work out a little smoother.
Cool. All right. Well, tonight, guys, let's jump in. What was your favorite moment of the game? This game generally has some memorable moments in it. So, Chris, anything that stood out to you tonight in the game tonight?
Yeah, there were a couple of combats where I just felt great about how they came out. I spent a lot of effort and time building up my fleet. And usually, actually, historically in this game, Steve beats the crap out of me in combat, and so I just went after him hard today, even though it probably was not the best actual winning strategy. So that felt good. I mean, in kind of like a crappy, selfish way. But honestly, I think my favorite moment was watching the end game tallies and seeing Tim, who basically played the buy victory points, method of playing. The strategy worked and he came out with a win. And that was just, a testament to how varied, the options are to score points in this game. And I thought I got a real kick out of that.
It was a testament to how Weasley Tim won this game tonight. He didn't even, he didn't do any combats. He just kind of he didn't upgrade any ships. He just kind of hung out and built these boring ass monoliths. Who wants
monoliths?
But by Weasley, I think you meant diplomatically. I think that's what you were.
He went with the museum strategy and just, oh, man.
Well, you guys let me get away with it this time. You usually don't. Usually somebody steps in and ruins my strategy. But appreciate that. It was nice.
The monoliths are the one part of this game that I'm like, oh, man, I could have done without that, because it is basically the buy victory points.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no, a monolith. I mean,
but the thing is that you actually do have to invest quite a bit to get there, right? You have to buy buy a pretty big technology tile, and then you have to spend quite a bit of building resources to do that. And
Yeah.
because I was building those and not building ships and not upgrading, you guys could have taken them. And if you come in, take ownership of a planet that I've built a monolith at, then you get the points for it. So it's kind of a risky strategy too. That being said, by the end of the game, by the last half of the game, I could tell that I was going to be kind of left alone. And so I felt okay doing it. So I don't think it's that cheap of a strategy, to be honest. When I see someone doing that, I think it's kind of interesting that they're able to pursue it, but it's, and I'm shaking his head. I think it's cheap.
Oh no, I didn't. I didn't think it was cheap. I thought it was great. I think that's why it was one of my favorite moments, of seeing that kind of come to fruition and pay off for you. So good for you. It ain't going to happen again, but good for you this time.
It was well done. I will say it was well done, and it's nice that it is a path to victory. But you have to live with yourself, knowing what kind of path you took to get there. My favorite moment of the night was, I think this game crescendos at the right time. Chris touched on it. Everyone's building up their ships for the whole game, and then combat usually kind of explodes around 7 or round 8, the last 2 rounds of the game. There was that battle in the middle for a big 4-point swing that Chris didn't get initially, and then he came back again and took it away from Steve. And then there was that battle with me against the Guardians, which if I had won that, I would have a chance at victory. Instead, I narrowly lost the victory and saw it fade away in the hands of monolithic Tim over there. So I liked that this game kind of crescendos in that way, and that's just it's a nice feeling.
Yeah, it's also kind of cool that there are some hidden points in the game, right? You can't just map it out and be like, okay, I know how many points. I know who's going to win. First of all, you don't know how that final combat's going to go, but also there's the hidden victory point tokens, and that can range a lot. It could be anywhere. What's the max? Are they 3 points highest, or 4 points? 4. So you could have somebody that has 9 to 12 points out in hidden victory points, and the other person's got their slots filled up and they've got 3 victory points from it. If they just don't, if they don't go up combat enough and pick up enough victory points. This game, I didn't even pick up a single victory point because I literally didn't get involved in a single combat. So that's not where my points were.
I want to say the way you won was freaking cool. Not a single reputation tile. And it was, I don't think I've seen anybody win that way. And usually if they go that strategy, is with the plants and kind of turtling back and building monoliths and hiding out. And the way you did it was pretty cool. So that was nicely done.
Well, thanks, guys. I had a lot of fun. There was a lot of fun moments tonight. Like I said, every time that one of you guys battled the ancients or battled one of the the AI ships, I was just like, okay, let me roll because I'm not getting any rolling done. So I had some fun. Just rolling the dice for the AI was a good time. That last combat, Adam, against you, I felt bad about it because you just got slaughtered in that.
I got crushed. Oh my gosh.
Combat, but it's fun doing that. But so this is going to kind of touch on tonight, but really kind of touch on past experiences. And that is that there's usually some memorable experiences for me in this game, and they're usually frustrating experiences. Usually it's where hey, I'm building up a strategy and then someone comes in and just, takes a spot away from me or wipes out my fleet, and I'm just not expecting it. And so tonight was a enjoyable experience for me because that didn't happen. And I saw it happen to Steve several times. He got kind of picked on by Chris over there, and he had a few rough moments in the game. And that didn't happen to be tonight, but it stood out to me that I didn't have any negative experiences in tonight's game. And I'm going to I wanted to bring that up because it's going to lead a little bit into my answer on the final question tonight, and how I generally feel about the game. So why don't we jump into that, and I'll start on it. So, our last question is, would you request to play the game again? This game has a lot going for it. I love the production of it. I love the things that you're doing in the game, but it can be so frustrating to me sometimes. I've had some really bad moments where I have to take a step back and just, okay, that was a game. Let me just try to circle back and see if I can figure this out. And actually I have sometimes I've had a really bad start to the game where I wasn't drawing the exploration tiles I wanted. Sometimes I've gotten, attacked early in the game where I felt like, okay, they just wiped me out. I've got no chance of coming back. And then ended up coming back and having a pretty solid game. So there's opportunities to catch up. You're never really out until the end. You really get hit bad at the end of the game, then it's hard to come back. But but there can just be some negative things that happen, some bad luck, some bad combat, some opponents coming in. Your opponents can really mess with you in this game. So it's full of those moments, and that makes it hard for me to say I want to play it. But same thing going, I actually do sometimes. Sometimes I'm like, I just feel like a big epic game where I get to explore the galaxy and hope that the right things that I want come up and that I get to build up these ships. So there's enough fun things in there too that I actually will choose sometimes to play this game. And I think that says a lot for a game that has also offered a lot of really frustrating moments to me. So that's my general take on it. What about you, Chris? How, would you request Eclipse Second Dawn for the Galaxy again?
Yeah, absolutely. This is a really fun game. And, it's funny. There's a few games out there. They're generally big world building type of games, often with lots of combat. They just make me nervous. I start the game out and my heart's thumping. I'm like, it's like watching a good movie. And I love that. This game has a lot of that to it, a lot of fun choices. Like I said before, it's relatively intuitive. I think after a play or two, you can feel pretty competent with it. Lots of player interaction, which is always great. I mean, tons of player interaction. And just overall, a really fun game outing.
What about you, Adam?
I love this game. I love it. I kind of bought it from the Kickstarter just thinking like, oh, maybe I like this game. It looks awesome. Space, 4X, this and that. I love it. The first time I played it, Tim, you were there. There was this nerd robot dude who I think round 3 or 4 absolutely destroyed me. And my game was over at that point. And I was crushing. It was so frustrating. And I had no chance the rest of the game. And I didn't even talk to you about it afterward. I still have nightmares about this guy. But I love that this game gives you those highs and lows. It can hurt you. It can sting you if you don't know what you're doing. But if you do know what you're doing, you learn the game a little bit, you can protect yourself and you can guard from those kinds of things. And you can take the opportunities when they're there. I can't get enough of this game. It takes a long time. We've played it a few times now. And even tonight, I think it took us, I don't know, we started at 7:30, ended at 11:30 or so. So about a 4-hour game. And we've played it a few times. And we weren't dilly-dallying at all. We were moving right along. So you got to be in the right mindset. You got to be ready for a long night. But if all those things are in place, it's a great game.
Yeah.
All right. Right on. Well, that was that'll wrap up our conversation on Eclipse Second Dawn for the Galaxy. So let's jump into one last question for the night. And that is there anything that's got you excited in the world of board games this week? So, Chris, anything for you? You're out on the road still. You've been paying attention to games right now. What's going on with you?
Yeah, I've actually got a fun one, and this is one that you guys know about because you kind of walked with me through this one. But I love Kickstarter. I love getting Kickstarter games. I love getting Kickstarter games that have big minis and great art, and that's just I just love it. But because I've been on the road for so long now, I've kind of put those to the side. I figured, I don't have a home right now. Even last thing I need to be doing is buying some more games. And then I saw Twisted Fables from Dimension Games popped up, and I particularly was interested because not only does it look amazing, but I am a backer on Dawn of Madness, which is from a few weeks ago, my number one Kickstarter that I'm waiting to get. And then I saw this one and I kind of went back and forth on it and finally decided to go in on it. And I'm incredibly glad that I did. It just looks like a fun game. Again, the production looks terrific. The art looks great. The gameplay seems really fun. And I'm pretty psyched to get it. So I'm glad that I decided to pull the trigger on that one and actually do it because I came very close to not doing it.
So you did fine. You did back it. Okay.
Yeah. I think generally speaking, if Tim says don't back it, I absolutely need to back it. Yeah, and I think Tim was not saying anything bad about the game by saying don't back it. He was saying you got enough games already that are.
No, I wasn't. Yeah, I mean, it looks cool. It had neat minis and stuff like that. It could be a great game. I didn't look that closely into it. I just my feeling is I don't know. I'm just a little less of a risk taker than as you are, and I feel like hey, if I want a game that has a certain type of gameplay, I'll check to see what's out there already and highly rated, and I know people love it. So that's just my own way to go about it. I'm glad that you like taking those risks, Chris, because then I get to play lots of games I wouldn't get to play otherwise. So. I hope it's great. It should be fun. What about you, Adam? Anything exciting going on?
I have my eyes on Dune Imperium.
Oh, I was going to mention that tonight. Right on.
Oh, sorry to steal that from you.
Oh, neat.
I love the theme. I love Dune, Frank Herbert, the books, the old school movie with Captain Picard in there, and then the dude from Twin Peaks. I love it, man. So I watched the playthrough, and it just looks so cool. You got to earn each victory point. So it's a little worker placement and deck building. It has a little market at the top. You're buying these cards, adding to your deck. You can trash some of the cards, your starting cards from your deck, and you're just doing a slow build, little engine build. It looks freaking cool. A little bit of area control in there. Tim, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, same thing. I mean, it looks really fun. And I mentioned last week when I mentioned the Lost Ruins of Arnak, which also is worker placement and deck building. And they're two of my favorite mechanisms. And you combine the two things together, and that seems like a great time to me. So I haven't really watched gameplay of it. I just, knowing the license and knowing the mechanisms that are there and just hearing some great reviews, it's got me super excited. So, Adam, like as soon as this thing's out on Tabletop Simulator, this has got to be our game night game. I want to play this so bad. And I'm very tempted, like that. It's going to be a challenge. I'm going to be watching closely as that and Lost Ruins come out, because I probably won't buy both of them, but I will almost definitely be buying one of the two. So I'm excited to try them both and then, add one of those two pretty cool looking games to my collection.
I'll take Dune if you want to take Lost Ruins.
All right, there you go. Okay, cool. Right on. Well, that's fun that you mentioned that, because I'm also very excited about it. And hearing you explain it gets me even more psyched up. Like I said, I haven't watched the gameplay of it. So what you just said about it makes it sound really interesting to me. Just a couple really quick things I'll mention. I had talked about Dwellings of Eldervale being one of my most excited Kickstarters to receive. And I just got the notice today that they're about to ship them out. It is going to be getting shipped to my old address in a different state, but I communicated with my landlord today and worked out so that I can make sure that if it does show up at my old address, I'll still get the box. So I'm very excited about that. The other thing I'll mention is that I just a couple of weeks ago got my new game table by boardgametables.com, the Jasper model of the table. Had a chance to get some playing on that over the last couple of weeks, and I am absolutely loving it. So if you are interested in a reasonably priced board game table, check the Jasper table out by boardgametables.com. I'm super happy with it. Quality, the price. It's, for me, I'm never having owned an actual board game table before. It's a nice step up in like experience from just a regular, standard dining room table. So those are a couple things going on for me this week. All right, guys. Well, thanks. That was a lot of fun tonight. Why don't we wrap up this episode of Board Game Hot Takes? You can find us on Twitter at BG_Hot Takes, on Facebook at Board Game Hot Takes, and on BoardGameGeek.com under Guild 3804. And hey, if you like what you're listening to, go out on Apple Podcasts and rate us, or just leave some remarks, give us a rating. It'll help other people find us, and we'd really appreciate it. Otherwise, reach out to us on some of these social media locations. Tell us what you thought of our takes on the game that we played tonight, and we'd love to hear from you. Until next week, take care, everybody.
Good night, guys.